Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with a little revenge from our OP. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. I think I took my old company down over a $240 dispute. I was the lead editor for a production house. We did mostly commercials for radio and television. Small company, but we did pretty well for the most part. But being a small company, jobs overlapped. And since I know how to use Google, I also became the IT guy. I worked at this production house for 8 years. Overall, I was pretty content there. I made some awesome friends, but my boss, the owner/production manager, was a real jerk. He was the kind of guy who would hire people for as little money as possible and get them to work 12 to 16-hour days for the effing experience. My boss was the kind of person who'd tell you on a daily basis how great of a boss he was, how effective a leader he was, every day wasting his time and money on ridiculous meetings that literally took half a day and consisted of nothing meaningful but a huge amount of head inflation. He would routinely deny people any kind of monetary raise, even after years of experience, saying that the company could not afford that, all while he furnished his private office, which was an entire floor above the rest of the office space, with extravagant furniture and expensive decorations. I could honestly make an entire subreddit on how awful a boss/terrible a person this guy was. So after some quick reflection on how much typing I wanted to do today, here's a bulleted list of the worst things he was doing on company time. Drinking and driving. Would routinely get me to pirate software for him, including software we use to actually run the business. Not putting anyone on payroll, which means you are forever a freelancer at this company. Hired a company who would build an entire second story to the office without a permit. Somehow crossing the Canada-US border drunk and with open alcohol. Withholding people's pay. Buying things for the office, stealing them for home. No vacation time or pay. He expected all of us to either work through a client's funeral or take a couple of hours as no-pay leave. He would degrade all employees, but he was way more harsh on the female employees. Would literally scare people into submission. Micromanage everything. Blame the employees for following directions. Anyway, the list goes on and on, but for the most part, none of this really affected me. Until his wife started working for the company. She was hired on after being fired elsewhere as our accountant. She would track our hours every day, making sure to conveniently neglect any extra time we put in over weekends or after hours. Somehow, even after working 50 to 60-hour weeks, she would come after the employees saying we were only available for 30 hours or so. Again, these were all things that never really affected me, until Christmas 2015. I got notice 2 days before our Christmas paycheck via email that the accountant was going to take $240 or so off my regular pay because I had left the office for 2 hours during the week. I calmly replied to the email that we all got to do what we got to do, and hopped online and started applying for editing jobs elsewhere. I told my wife about this and got irrationally mad about it. Nearly instantly, I was offered a job from my current employer, which I accepted. At that point, I told my wife I'd give my old employer a year before they closed down. We made a list and dealt with each item to the best of our abilities. I anonymously reported both my boss and his wife for drunk driving, as well as letting a couple of my cop buddies know about it. On my boss's Facebook page, he was complaining about how many times he'd been pulled over recently. He seems to still be driving, but at least it was an inconvenience to him. I reported the software piracy. The pirated software was Windows, Microsoft Office, and the Adobe Creative Suite. Adobe didn't do anything, but Microsoft took it pretty seriously. And I heard from one of my old coworkers that they didn't fight the fines. I also filled out Form CPT-1E, I think that's what it was called, which was designed to help employers and employees understand whether or not employees should be on payroll or not. From what I gather through the grapevine, this led to something called a forensic audit, which seems to have led to a lot of back payments or something. I'm not an accountant, and I don't really know how this all works. But from what I understand, my old employer ended up paying quite a few fines. This is all unconfirmed grapevine stuff, though. I reported locally regarding the floor that was built without a permit. More grapevine stuff, but it seems that made selling the office a little more difficult. So I'll add that to the win pile. So anyways, I was wrong. I told my wife it'd be a year and they would be shut down. It took a year and 3 months. The company officially closed March 31st, 2017. I don't know if any of my actions are directly responsible for the closure, but I like to think I at least pushed it in that direction. Oh, and I also texted his wife to take a look at his browsing history. Not really proud of that one, since I would normally not out a person, but it turns out he'd been sleeping at the office almost every night since I did that. You're supposed to get a cash reward for software piracy tips that turn out positive. And our next story. Bridezilla catering rage. I used to manage a catering company for my boss while he was undergoing chemotherapy. This is one of my first gigs where I was in charge. The bride calls me at 1 in the afternoon the day before the wedding and decides she wanted a cheaper menu. She and her husband already paid for almost everything, and it's far too late to change anything. I told her that, but she started throwing a fit, saying that she wanted to change the steak to chicken and demanded we either serve chicken or charge her the price of the chicken, as she would not be paying for anything extra. I informed her that according to the contract, she's to receive 150 steak lunches at a price of $50 per plate. It also states that she can't change the menu unless she does it at least a month before the wedding. When she hears this, she flips the hell out and starts screaming at me, calling me illiterate, and telling me her fiancé is a lawyer and will sue me, etc., etc. She hands the phone over to her fiancé. He also started screaming at me, saying it's his damn wedding and he can have whatever he wants. They end up firing me at the moment, and I inform them the cancellation fee is 90% of the cost of catering, which was already paid for. And they start screaming at me, telling me that I ain't crap and they can get anyone to cater for them, and they're going to make me pay for it, etc. They end up hanging up on me, thank God, and I had an inkling that I should probably keep making the food in case they call tomorrow and want us to cater. So we finish cooking, and the next day at 7 a.m., I get a call from the groom, and he demands that I come down there to cater their wedding, or they're going to sue me for not providing service. I calmly tell the guy that they terminated the contract yesterday, and as per the termination clause on the contract, we're entitled to keep 90% of the cost of the catering. He is raging. He didn't say anything, but I could feel how mad he was over the phone. After a moment of awkward silence, I inform him that if he would like us to cater the event, he has to do same-day catering, which is 3 times the original price I charged him. He has to pay all fees in advance, and the food depends on what we have available and ready, and we also reserve the right to refuse service. He gets really PO'd at this point, telling us this is extortion. He already paid for the food, so he didn't have to pay again. I informed him again of the termination clause and also informed him that the food was for a previous contract, and that contract had ended, and he would have to pay for it again. He ended up starting a new contract with us for 3 times the original price. He tried to change the menu again, just to spite me, but I then made sure he knew I reserved the right to refuse service. He and his bridezillas kept everything the same down to the baby carrots, and of course the steak, all while paying me 3 times the original price if they just stuck with the original contract. As soon as we got to the venue, before I got anything out, I made the bride and groom sign the new contract plus pay me completely in advance, $22K, and left to deposit the money. While I was gone, they harassed my caterers and threatened someone with deportation even though they were legal. He tried to sue us later, and the judge heard the recorded phone calls, saw the contract, and told him to pay my legal fees. I looked them up on Facebook recently. Apparently they're divorced now. It's only been 3 years. That's awesome. That contract was designed by someone who dealt with these types before. And our next story. Litterbug busted. So my last job, I worked at a construction company that had a fairly large yard/land as well as a warehouse. In the yard were many old storage trailers, probably around 30 to 40. Just old semi-trailers that were old and not really roadworthy anymore, so they are or were used to store customers' building materials and machinery to be delivered on the job. So there's a fairly long dirt road out to the very back portion of the yard that isn't visible from the shop or warehouse. We mostly just keep our oldest and worst trailers out there before we get around to bringing them to the junkyard. But some of them are still used by customers and have equipment in them. One day in mid-March, I was instructed to head back there to check in a trailer for one of our customers. Now this was after a really snowy winter, so there was a lot of dirty piles of snow everywhere and things like that. And more or less we had no reason to go back there during the winter as snow removal was so hard to stay on top of anyway. I hadn't been back there in a few months. So when I get back there, I'm pretty pissed when I see about 10 large black household trash bags in a big pile thrown underneath one of the trailers. This is a lot of effing trash, like a month's worth for a family of 5. At this point, raccoons or some other wildlife had gotten to them, and they were pretty ripped apart and thrown about as well. What a jerk. I'm pretty heated, and I go back to the warehouse to get some stuff to clean it up, gloves, a shovel, a big bin to scoop it in so I can grab it with the forklift. About a minute into scooping it up, I'm PO'd because it's under a trailer, so I have to bend down and basically crouch, and it's extra difficult/awkward to shovel. A light goes on, and I'm thinking any a-hole this dumb with this much trash certainly has thrown away some mail in this time period. Within 30 seconds, I find 3 pieces of mail with his name and address on it. I call the non-emergency police line and tell them someone's been dumping trash. Within a minute, a cop shows up and we have a chat of how can I approach this short of driving to the dude's address and spreading this crap all over his lawn. What my petty revenge idea was. So the cop is the man and actually goes to the address, finds out the guy moved, went to the post office, finds his new address, and confronts him about it. Of course, the guy denies it, with some story about how it must have been his landlord after he moved out, and the cop basically asked him if he'd rather just clean it up or try to tell that story to a judge. So now that I knew he was going to be back to clean it up, I threw all the trash back under the trailer, and ripped the bags up a little more so it was a bit more gross and unmanageable. The absolute best part was that the time he went back in the evening, it was torrentially downpouring with thunder and lightning, absolutely raining buckets. So he got to clean up his mess while me and 2 other officers watched him inside our nice, warm, dry vehicles while he got dumped on in very cold, very heavy rain. Haha, karma is a B. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.